I am so sorry. Because it is my fault. Because it was my project.
My name is Craig Corbin. I'm about to go screen The Blair Witch.
What is that?
I'm so sorry. I'm so scared. I have no idea what the hell this movie is. A sequel, a reboot, a remake? A few months ago it was called The Woods, for Christ's sake. I don't know what the hell this movie's driving me. And I could really use a Kleenex right now. I'm so congested.
Yes, well, that was a barrel full of laughs. Alright gang, I just got out of Blair Witch, aka The Woods, aka the sort of remake, sort of sequel to the 1999 landmark and pioneering horror film, The Blair Witch Project. I think I can go on record to say that this film is probably about 85% remake and about 15% sequel. Not a good sign. I don't know if that makes sense. So it's a remake-quill. Is that actually, has that been a coin word or phrase? Because if not, I'm going to officially trademark it and charge everyone $20 for every time it's used in social media. Before I actually talk about Blair Witch, I think we should really kind of discuss the whole history behind this franchise. Now, I have a lot of interesting memories of screening the Blair Witch Project back in 1999. I remember taking my sister to it, and it really had a profound impact on me. Also on my sister, who got really sick while watching it. And not because of the shocking imagery or violence or gore, which there wasn't a lot in that film. It was more or less she just got nauseous from all the shaky cam. I just remember what a, profoundly innovative and daringly ingenious film that was. And it certainly didn't create the found footage genre, and it didn't create the faux documentary genre. There were certainly films that tapped into that well before the Blair Witch, but it certainly popularized the whole notion of found footage. And I mean, if you're talking about some of the most important and influential films of the last, say, 20, 25 years, I don't know how you don't put Blair Witch Project on there, because the ripple effects of that film can be traced on so many contemporary horror films that came out in its wake. I mean, you could just see how the found footage genre has completely flourished. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse.
I'm so scared.
Now, the film was also landmark for how it really ushered in the age of using viral and internet marketing, which just was not done back in the late 90s to advertise a film. And the film, and that's something that is done so much these days. It's so ubiquitous in the film world, but back then, not a lot. The film had an alluring, sort of an enigmatic mystique about it, because there's a lot of rumors going around at the time that they didn't use actors, they used real people, and that the events in the film were real.
The search of the 3 missing Montgomery College students continues in Frederick County tonight.
10 days and thousands of man-hours have been unable to produce any clues.
The marketing campaign behind the Blair Witch Project was ingenious. Now, of course, this brings us to Blair Witch. Now, rather compellingly, up until a few months ago, this film was known as The Woods. And I remember seeing a trailer for The Woods several months back, and I'm like, yeah, this looks interesting. It looks very Blair Witchy. And then of course they came out at San Diego Comic-Con in July, and the makers were like, no, this isn't called The Woods. This is called Blair Witch, and it's going to be a remake/sequel to the original film that'll actually directly reference the events of the first film. And then everyone was like, holy shit. Oh my god! That's also kind of an advertising first. I can't recall another film ever that sort of was engineered and written and produced and directed and made and marketed as one film, and then just a few short months before its major release, they pull the rug right out from under us and say, no, it's a completely different type of film altogether. And it's like, that is pretty bold and inventive. So I got to give props to the marketing behind this film. But as for the film itself, I gotta say, I was really disappointed in Blair Witch, primarily because I think it pulls a full-on Force Awakens. And I think anyone who has read or followed my video and print reviews of The Force Awakens understands exactly what I'm talking about, and that is this. It is essentially just a fairly shot-for-shot, blow-for-blow rehash of 1999's Blair Witch Project, in probably even in more profound ways than The Force Awakens was simply rehashing a lot of the story beats and themes and elements from the very first Star Wars film, A New Hope.
Not a good sign.
And it's really all there. I mean, it's almost to the point where the film feels sort of just like a lazily laid out beat for beat reboot, remake, whatever the hell you want to call it these days, of that 1999 film.
Legend said there's been a curse on these woods.
Do you believe in the stories about the Blair Witch?
So that's ultimately kind of disappointing, and I think that the film has a few interesting and original ideas that it wants to lend to the table. I mean, obviously, the first film didn't have the reliance on social media and digital photography and advances in filmmaking technology that we have today. So in this film, they're using like earpiece camcorders, and they're using drones. So that kind of adds like a bit of freshness to the underlying story that they're trying to tell.
This way, come on!
But it really boils down to it. It's really about a bunch of characters led by one very intrepid female documentary filmmaker, much like the first one, that wants to sort of go into the woods and explore either the truths, the half-truths, the mysteries, or the false truths about the Blair Witch mystery. And it's a carbon copy of the first film in so many ways. I mean, there's even sequences that are sort of recreated in this new film from the events of the first film.
Oh, they're everywhere. What was that?
I think that really hurt the overall momentum and the flow of the film, because it's like I kind of saw where it was going from one scene to the next, because it seemed like they were relying on the blueprint of the Blair Witch Project so rigidly, it kind of really subdued any amount of terror and suspense. Now, that is not to say that this is not a meticulously well-crafted film. It really is, and I think oh god, the name of the director escapes me, so I apologize, but he does have moments of visual innovation, and he does some very interesting things with like the earpiece camcorders and with the drones. One area of this film that's positively masterful is its sound design and its sound editing and its sound engineering. The way the film utilizes like surround sound and an ambient sound of the woods around the characters, that is almost more uneasy and frightening than any type of supernatural entity that could be at the center of this film. So I mean, if there's any justice in the world, this film should be nominated in multiple sound categories for the Academy Awards next spring. And when the film builds towards its climax, I think the final 15 plus minutes of this film are gangbusters, amazing and terrifying and legitimately riveting. So
We found it!
That's not your sister. That can't be her.
Come on! Get in the corner! Don't look!
I don't know if the ending was enough to save this film from itself. It sounds so perplexing to say that because I was really so mesmerized by what he achieved in the final moments, and it engrossed me so much. But when it all boils down to it, the lead up and build up to that final 15 to 20 minutes, it's just kind of lackluster. I think another problem that really sort of hurt the film, and it shows, I think, a general trend that's happening with a lot of horror cinema these days, is that there is a real over-reliance on cheap jump scares. And I know that's so par for the course when it comes to horror films these days, but you know, you never saw that relied on during the era during which time the Blair Witch Project was made. That movie was really about creating a sensation of unease and a really dark and dreary sense of atmosphere, and it didn't have to rely on simplistic tricks to frighten audience members. This film, I think there's a bit too much of an over-reliance on jump scares.
There's something out there.
There's some potentially intriguing aspects of, and I don't know if this is a spoiler to say this, but the film sort of dabbles into some weird levels of temporal displacement, and time affects certain characters over others, and it's really kind of wonky, and I'm not sure if the film really explains that as well as I think it wants to. It's not to say that every film should really explain all of its inherent secrets, but I think aspects of Blair Witch, and especially its ending, will leave viewers scratching their heads with a bit more frustration than perhaps the ending of the Blair Witch Project. When I rewatched the Blair Witch Project recently, the one thing I took away from it is that the cast in that film, they didn't feel like actors. They felt like real, ordinary, everyday people just completely inhabiting that faux documentary. Here, it's kind of a bit of the opposite effect. It feels like a bit more seasoned actors who are playing parts, and that's not to say that they don't give good performances. They just don't have that sort of gritty, lived-in verisimilitude that the actors from the first film had. And maybe this new Blair Witch is a bit too glossy for its own good. I really have strong memories of the really grainy black and white photography of that first film, and it just felt more palpable. Here, Blair Witch feels like a poser film. It's a film that's trying to essentially imitate another by borrowing a lot of its elements and passing it off as something fresh, and ultimately I think that's kind of its undoing. And I think it sort of shows a larger unfortunate trend in Hollywood these days of a lot of studios and filmmakers that are essentially just spoon-feeding audience members a lot of leftovers from far greater films and sort of just passing it off as their own, than really being trailblazingly original and doing something profoundly interesting with old material. And if you're going to do a sequel to the Blair Witch Project, don't make it a beat-for-beat remake, at least for the first 60-plus minutes, because I thought that was a real bummer. So yeah, I was quite disappointed by the Blair Witch. So
I have no idea what the hell this movie is.
So there you go. There's my review of Blair Witch. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of the film. Let me know what you thought of the original Blair Witch Project from 1999. Let me know what some of your favorite found footage films are. Thank you very much for watching. If you could like this video, I'd appreciate it. If you could subscribe to my YouTube channel, that would mean the absolute world to me. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you at the movies.
And I could really use a Kleenex right now.